Cuba is often considered a restricted or taboo topic in the United States among its citizens. The Cuban Revolution, however, is a matter in which is very interesting and sparked a whole series of events which would forever impact Cuba. The book, Women in Cuba, The Making of a Revolution Within the Revolution, sets the stage for the specific change, but as the title suggests, is more focused on the revolution among women. Mary Alice Walters, the book's editor, says, "The Making of a Revolution Within the Revolution is not a book about women, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that it does not start with women, nor could it. This is a book about the Cuban Revolution. It is about the millions of working people, men and women of all ages, who have made that socialist revolution and how their actions transformed them as they fought to transform their world." The book not only gives internal information about the revolution, but it describes how women in particular played an extremely important role during the time by interviewing two women who played exceptionally important roles in the overthrow of the United States-backed Batista dictatorship, and one who played an important role in the organization formed after the revolution, the Federation of Cuban Women. It allows the readers to make their own interpretations of Cuba and its famous communist leader Fidel Castro. The book allows the reader to venture into Castro's inner circle and discover what a revolutionary he truly was, despite what individuals believe he is and was today. After reading the book, the reader can truly see that Cuba had left behind its days of illiteracy, corruption, and inequalities due to the revolution that sparked. The two main authors of the book are two women who were directly involved in the revolution themselves. Vilma Espion was a graduate of the University of Orient. This was where she first began her political activity. She graduated from the university with a chemistry degree, becoming one of the first in that field and one of the only women in the field. She was a revolutionary who later founded the Federation of Cuban Women and became a women's rights activist. She was part of the July 26 movement and later the Second Eastern Front and fought directly beside Raul Castro, who she later married. Azalea de los Santos also contributes much to the book. She also attended the university where she was studying to be a teacher. Like Espion, she was part of the July 26 movement and the Second Front and contributes abundant primary information to the book. She later placed her skills to use by directing 400 primary schools for the combatants, many of whom were illiterate. The third woman interviewed in the book is Yolanda Ferrier. She was not directly involved in the revolution movement, but she was directly involved in the Federation of Cuban Women, or FCW. This organization was established during the revolution to aid women in obtaining equal rights. The book was edited by Mary Alice Walters. She is the president of Pathfinder Press and became actively involved in the Socialist Workers' Party in the 1960s. Walters has spent much of her career interviewing these women and devoted significant time to understanding the writing about the Cuban Revolution. The book is divided into two main parts. The first section of the book deals with the actual revolution in Cuba and Espion and de los Santos' roles as women in the revolution. The second part of the book deals with the birth of the Federation of Cuban Women. The thesis for the first section of the book is the author's goal to explain how women in Cuba played an immensely important role in this revolution. The thesis for the second part of the book is the author's goal in showing the birth of the FCW and how it was started out of necessity for female participation in the social order, not out of deception or a false sense of cooperation to the Cuban Revolution. Not only is the book divided into two main parts, it is divided into four main interviews, with the first two from de los Santos and Espion, and the last two being from Ferrier and Espion. The first interview with de los Santos is very insightful and contains very specific information into not only her involvement in the revolution, but the revolution itself. The probing questions the editor asks assist the reader in grasping the background information needed to understand many of the events. The interview begins by allowing the reader some time to get to know the individuals and why they were involved in such a controversial movement, and ultimately what their actions led to. The strides de los Santos made for women were monumental. She was in charge of the education of the women and many men in the Revolution. Before her involvement in the Revolution, she was a school teacher. This was essential to the Revolution to educate young individuals who otherwise would have become housewives or manual laborers. The book's title foreshadows the events which will unfold on the pages, the revolution within the revolution. However, the reader gets somewhat distracted due to the large amount of inset text and pictures. The insets are often statements from Raul or Fidel that are intended to complement the text or statements made by the women in the book. As a reader, however, I found them to be very distracting and unnecessary. In those sections of text, it would be more helpful to have some background information or explanations of the individuals being mentioned. Each time one of the women mentioned a new name, I found myself looking to the footnote just to be sent to the end of the book to look in the glossary. It would have been much more helpful if these individuals were included in the footnote rather than at the end of the book. I also found myself stopping periodically to look up phrases or terms that were not footnoted. I feel that additional background would have been helpful in these situations. For example, Walters asked de los Santos, "Tell us about your activities following the coup." De los Santos states, "I saw the March 1952 coup as an act of brutality and opposed it from the outset. When it took place, the university shut its doors as an act of protest. A group of us stayed there, however, to see what would happen and then figure out what we would do. I feel as if it would have been very beneficial to me as a reader, not having much background on Cuba, to know a little more about the coup, rather than an arbitrary statement by Fidel. The statements that de los Santos makes, however, about her staying back after the university shut its doors, shows what type of person she was. She was truly a revolutionary and was very much a part of the whole process." Later in the book, she speaks of smuggling guns and money into Havana in effort to aid in the revolution. Not only was she directly involved in the activities such as the one I just stated, but she was also a mastermind behind the organization of strikes and events in which needed to take place to make the revolution successful. Espion is often given much credit on part of the revolution. Her history began much better than others. She came from a wealthy family and was able to attend college, unlike many women in Cuba. She was a chemist, one of the only women in that particular field at that time. One of Espion's statements stands out particularly to me. She says, "We had no preconceived structure of agenda. There was just a desire by women to participate in a revolutionary process whose aim was to transform the lives of those who had been exploited and discriminated against and create a better society for all." This was the particular attitude of many women in Cuba. They wanted an opportunity to participate in politics and society since they had not been able to for a long period of time. Espion says that women acted as messengers, carried medicines and weapons, and even began to transport dynamite and carry out sabotage. The work was often done in couples because a couple always aroused less suspicion than a group or a person alone. Women had a very important place and were very active during that stage of the struggle. Espion gets the essence of women's roles and the activities they carried out during the revolution. The second half of the book deals with the Federation of Cuban Women and some of its earliest stages. In the beginning, the organization did not have any formal structure or name. About the revolution and later Federation of Cuban Women, Walters states, "Millions of Cubans responded to these counter-revolutionary acts by demonstrating their determination to defend their conquests, arms in hand. They responded by deepening the social and economic transformation of conditions they had inherited, winning ever-broadening support as they did so. Women joined in these class battles in massive numbers, transforming not only themselves, but the men together with whom, shoulder to shoulder, they built, taught, and fought." This statement represents a wonderful summative statement about the revolution and what it became and what came from it, such as the Federation of Cuban Women. The 3 individuals interviewed in the book each had a specific impact on Cuba and were able to discuss their experiences in the book. This book is appropriate for individuals studying Latin America, but specifically the Cuban Revolution and the role of women during the event. The editor has done an ample job of asking probing questions, reaching the depth of information. However, the overuse of inset text from Fidel Castro and unnecessary photographs detracts from the overall message of the book.